Captain Blue, the little girl said with a bright smile, and the wrench slipped from Ethan Calloway's hand. Before you decide whether this was fate or coincidence, comment what you would have done in Ethan's place, and subscribe so you do not miss the next story where one small truth changes everything. For a moment, the sounds of the hotel lobby seemed to disappear. The soft hum of the air conditioning, the rolling wheels of expensive suitcases, the distant laughter drifting from the cafe near the entrance. Everything faded behind those two simple words. Captain Blue. No one had called him that in 8 years. No one except the woman he had loved and lost without ever knowing why. Ethan slowly looked up from the maintenance cart beside him. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. Golden hair framed her face in loose waves. Her blue eyes sparkled with innocent amusement as she pointed toward the blue pen clipped to his shirt pocket. Because of the blue pen, she explained cheerfully, and because you look like someone who could sail a ship. The tension in Ethan's chest loosened slightly. He forced a smile. Do I? Definitely. She nodded with complete confidence. You have the serious face. Ethan chuckled despite himself. Serious face. That sounded about right. For the last decade, newspapers had called him many things. Billionaire, visionary, hospitality king, Australia's youngest hotel magnate. But never Captain Blue. Never someone who could sail a ship through a child's imagination. And what's your name? He asked. Lily. She extended her hand with surprising professionalism. Lily Hayes. Ethan shook it. Nice to meet you, Lily Hayes. Nice to meet you too, Captain Blue. She grinned. Before Ethan could respond, a familiar female voice echoed across the lobby. Lily. The girl's face brightened immediately. Mom. She darted away before Ethan could say another word. He watched her run toward the front reception desk where a young woman stepped out from behind the counter. Charlotte Hayes bent down and wrapped her daughter in a quick hug. Even from across the marble floor, Ethan could see the exhaustion beneath her smile. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Her blonde hair was tied neatly into a professional bun, though a few loose strands escaped around her face. She looked younger than 30, yet somehow carried the weariness of someone who had spent years carrying burdens alone. You promised to wait near the staff room, Charlotte said gently. I know. Lily offered an apologetic smile. But I met Captain Blue. Charlotte blinked. Captain who? Lily pointed directly at Ethan. The moment Charlotte's eyes met his, she seemed embarrassed. I'm so sorry, she called out. She likes giving people nicknames. It's all right, Ethan replied. I've heard worse. Charlotte laughed softly. It was a warm sound. Natural. Unforced. The kind of laugh Ethan rarely heard in boardrooms worth billions of dollars. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. Captain Blue fixed the trolley wheel. Did he? Charlotte looked impressed. Then thank you. Ethan nodded politely. No problem. Charlotte smiled again before guiding Lily toward a side corridor. Ethan watched them disappear. Something about the interaction lingered longer than it should have. Perhaps because it felt real. Unscripted. Genuine. The kind of human moments his life had been missing for years. A vibration buzzed inside his pocket. Ethan glanced down at the secure phone. One message. From his executive assistant. Board meeting delayed. Media requests continue. Investors asking for statement. Ethan locked the screen immediately. None of that mattered right now. Because officially, Ethan Calloway no longer existed inside this building. For the next 2 weeks, he was simply Ethan Cole, temporary maintenance worker. Employee number 84726. 3 days earlier, he had walked away from a penthouse office overlooking Sydney Harbor. The reports on his desk had painted a troubling picture. Guest satisfaction was falling. Employee turnover was rising. Anonymous reviews described management as disconnected and indifferent. One particular comment had refused to leave his mind. The people making decisions upstairs have forgotten what life looks like down here. Ethan had built Calloway Hospitality from a single struggling property into one of the largest luxury hotel groups in the Southern Hemisphere. Yet somewhere along the way, distance had grown between executives and employees. So he decided to see the truth for himself. No cameras. No announcements. No special treatment. Just a uniform, a fake surname, and a maintenance cart. As he pushed the cart toward the service elevator, voices drifted from nearby reception. 2 guests were complaining loudly about a reservation error. Ethan watched Charlotte step forward. She listened patiently. She apologized sincerely. She offered solutions. Even when one guest became rude, she remained calm. professional, respectful. By the time the conversation ended, both guests were smiling. Ethan noticed something interesting. Charlotte never once defended herself. She focused entirely on helping the customer. Most employees would have become defensive. She simply chose kindness. An hour later, Ethan found himself repairing a faulty light fixture near the conference wing. The corridor was quiet. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Then he heard footsteps. Small footsteps. Lily again. She sat on a nearby bench, swinging her legs. "You're back," Ethan said. "Mum's finishing paperwork." Lily pointed toward the harbor. "Do you think boats ever get lonely?" Ethan paused. It was not the question he expected. "Sometimes. I think people get lonely too." Her voice was thoughtful. "Even grown-ups." Ethan stared at the water beyond the glass. "Why do you say that?" "Because Mum smiles a lot when people are looking." Lily shrugged. "But sometimes when nobody's watching, she looks sad." Ethan didn't know how to answer. Children often notice things adults missed. "Your mum loves you very much," he said finally. Lily smiled. "I know." Then she looked directly at him. "You look lonely too, Captain Blue." Ethan felt something shift deep inside his chest. For years he had attended charity galas, shareholder meetings, luxury events, and international conferences. Thousands of people knew his name. Yet somehow a 7-year-old girl sitting on a hotel bench had seen him more clearly than anyone else. Before he could reply, Charlotte appeared at the end of the hallway. "Lily." Relief crossed her face. "There you are." She approached quickly. "Sorry," she told Ethan. "She keeps escaping." "I wasn't escaping," Lily protested. "I was talking." Charlotte laughed. "That's even more dangerous." Ethan smiled as mother and daughter walked away together. But his eyes remained fixed on Lily. Captain Blue. 8 years ago, another woman had called him that. A woman he had loved. A woman who had vanished from his life without explanation. A woman whose memory still followed him through empty penthouses, crowded boardrooms, and quiet nights when success felt hollow. Ethan watched the little girl disappear around the corner. Then he looked down at the blue pen clipped to his shirt pocket. A strange feeling settled over him. Not fear. Not hope. Something in between. Because deep inside, a question had already begun to form. And before long, that question would change everything. The next morning began with the sharp scent of fresh coffee drifting through the lobby and the golden glow of sunlight spilling across the polished marble floor. Ethan arrived before 6 o'clock, dressed in the same maintenance uniform, pushing the same cart that had slowly made him invisible to most people around him. Invisible was exactly what he wanted. Yet as he moved through the quiet corridors, his thoughts kept returning to a little girl with blue eyes and a nickname he had not heard in nearly a decade. The hotel gradually came alive. Business travelers checked out. New guests arrived. Phones rang behind reception. Luggage wheels rolled across the floor. Through it all, Charlotte Hayes remained at her station. Ethan watched from a distance while replacing a faulty light fitting near the concierge desk. She greeted every guest with the same warmth. She remembered names. She listened carefully. She solved problems without drawing attention to herself. Most people never noticed how much effort that required. Ethan did. Around mid-morning, an elderly couple approached reception looking distressed. Their booking confirmation had somehow disappeared from the system. The husband appeared frustrated. The wife looked close to tears. Charlotte immediately stepped forward. "Let us sort this out together," she said gently. She offered them seats, brought water, and spent nearly 20 minutes calling different departments. Eventually, she secured them a harbor view room even better than the one they had originally booked. The relief on the couple's faces was immediate. As they walked away smiling, Ethan noticed something that bothered him. The duty manager who had been standing nearby never acknowledged Charlotte's effort. Instead, he handed her another stack of paperwork and walked off without a word. Charlotte simply thanked him and continued working. No complaint. No frustration. Just quiet professionalism. Later that afternoon, Ethan was repairing a loose door handle near one of the conference suites when raised voices echoed from the lobby. He glanced around the corner. A well-dressed guest was speaking sharply to Charlotte about a delayed airport transfer. The problem had clearly been caused by a third-party transport company, yet Charlotte listened patiently, as if the responsibility belonged entirely to her. "I understand your frustration," she said calmly. "Please give me a few minutes, and I will find another solution." The guest shook his head. "This is unacceptable." Ethan expected Charlotte to become defensive. Instead, she offered a sincere apology and immediately began making calls. Within 10 minutes, she had arranged private transport at no additional cost. The guest's attitude softened almost instantly. Ethan watched the entire exchange. The remarkable part was not her professionalism. It was her kindness. Most people were kind when life treated them well. Charlotte seemed kind despite carrying a weight nobody else could see. As evening approached, Ethan headed toward the staff courtyard behind the hotel. The air carried the scent of eucalyptus from nearby gardens. A cool breeze drifted in from the harbor. He found an empty bench and sat down with a takeaway coffee. A few minutes later, he heard familiar footsteps. Lily appeared carrying a small sketchbook nearly as large as her lap. Captain Blue. Ethan smiled despite himself. Hello, Lily. She sat beside him without invitation, as if they had known each other for years. Mum says I should not bother people while they are working. Wise advice. But you were sitting. Ethan laughed softly. Fair point. Lily opened her sketchbook. Page after page revealed drawings done in colored pencils. Boats, lighthouses, beaches, seagulls, harbor bridges. Most were surprisingly detailed for a child her age. Ethan stopped at one particular drawing. It showed a sailboat crossing bright blue water beneath a cloudless sky. Something about it felt strangely familiar. You like boats, he observed. Lily nodded. My mum says the father I never knew loved the ocean. Ethan's hand tightened slightly around his coffee cup. She told you that? Only a little. Lily looked down at the drawing. She says he was kind. Ethan felt an unexpected ache settle in his chest. Children often build entire worlds from tiny fragments of information. And what do you think? He asked quietly. Lily considered the question carefully. I think if someone is truly kind, they do not disappear on purpose. Ethan stared at the drawing for several seconds. The breeze rustled the pages of the sketchbook. Somewhere nearby, a magpie called from a rooftop. That sounds very wise, he finally said. Lily shrugged. Maybe. Then she turned another page. Tucked inside the back cover was an old photograph. Ethan only saw it for a moment before she closed the book again, but his pulse immediately quickened. The image had been faded and partially hidden, yet he was almost certain he had recognized the coastline in the background. Not because it was famous, because years ago, he had stood there himself beside someone he once believed he would spend the rest of his life with. Before he could ask about the photograph, Charlotte appeared at the courtyard entrance. There you are. Relief crossed her face again. I should have known. Lily grinned. We were talking. Charlotte smiled apologetically toward Ethan. I hope she has not been keeping you from work. Not at all. Ethan rose from the bench. We were discussing boats. One of her favorite topics. Charlotte took Lily's hand. For a brief moment, Ethan noticed the exhaustion in Charlotte's eyes. Again, not physical exhaustion. Something deeper. The kind carried by people who had learned to keep moving no matter how heavy life became. As mother and daughter walked away, Ethan found himself watching them longer than necessary. The old photograph lingered in his mind. So did Lily's words. If someone is kind, they do not disappear on purpose. For the first time since arriving at the hotel, Ethan felt certain of one thing. Whatever story connected Charlotte Hayes, Lily Hayes, and the memories he had spent years trying to bury, it was no longer something he could dismiss as coincidence. And somewhere hidden beneath ordinary days, quiet conversations, and a child's innocent smile, the truth was already waiting to be found. The photograph stayed in Ethan's mind long after his shift ended. That night, rain tapped softly against the windows of his serviced apartment overlooking the harbor. Sydney's skyline shimmered beneath low clouds, but Ethan barely noticed it. He sat alone at the small dining table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. For 8 years, he had trained himself not to look backward. The past belonged to another version of himself, a younger man. A man who had believed love was enough to overcome anything. Yet now a 7-year-old girl with bright blue eyes had unknowingly opened a door he thought was permanently closed. The next morning arrived gray and cool. A fine mist drifted across the waterfront as Ethan entered the hotel through the staff entrance shortly before dawn. The corridors were quiet except for the distant hum of vacuum cleaners and the occasional clink of housekeeping carts. As he pushed his maintenance trolley toward the lobby, he noticed Charlotte already standing behind reception. She was reviewing paperwork beneath the soft glow of a desk lamp. Her uniform was immaculate as always, But there was something different today. She looked tired. Not simply tired. Worried. Ethan noticed the way she checked her phone every few minutes. The way her smile faded whenever she thought nobody was watching. Around 7 o'clock, another receptionist arrived for the morning shift. The woman leaned toward Charlotte and lowered her voice, but Ethan still caught fragments of the conversation while replacing a decorative light fitting nearby. "Did the school call again?" the receptionist asked. Charlotte nodded quietly. "Everything is fine. Lily just needs to stay home another day. You should take leave." Charlotte forced a small smile. "I cannot afford to right now." The receptionist's expression softened. "You work too hard." Charlotte laughed gently. "Tell my electricity bill that." They both smiled, but Ethan noticed the sadness hidden beneath Charlotte's humor. The conversation ended when guests began arriving. Throughout the morning, Charlotte continued helping everyone around her while asking nothing for herself. She assisted an elderly tourist who had misplaced medication. She calmed an anxious couple whose luggage had been delayed. She even helped a new employee learn the reservation system despite clearly having too much work already. By midday, Ethan found himself searching for her without meaning to. It annoyed him slightly. He had come here to investigate operational problems, not become emotionally invested in the life of one receptionist. Yet every observation seemed to raise more questions. During his lunch break, Ethan sat in a quiet corner of the staff cafeteria. A few tables away, two employees were chatting over sandwiches. He had no intention of listening, but one name immediately caught his attention. "Charlotte deserves a promotion," one said. "Everyone knows that." The other shook her head. "Management keeps passing her over." "Why?" "Because she refuses to play politics." The first employee frowned. "She practically runs reception." "Exactly. They need her there." Ethan looked down at his coffee. "Interesting." A few minutes later, another employee joined the conversation. "Did you hear what happened last month?" he asked. "She covered 3 extra shifts after Emma resigned." "Again. And she still made it to every school event for her daughter." The others nodded with quiet admiration. Ethan found himself listening longer than necessary. By the end of lunch, one conclusion felt unavoidable. Everybody respected Charlotte. Not because she demanded it, because she earned it. Later that afternoon, Ethan was repairing a faulty lock near one of the executive meeting rooms when he heard laughter coming from the nearby staff courtyard. Genuine laughter. The kind that instantly draws attention. He stepped outside and immediately spotted Lily sitting beneath a large gum tree. Charlotte had apparently brought her to work for a few hours. The little girl sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket, surrounded by colored pencils and sheets of paper. Several staff members were gathered around her. Lily was showing them drawings. Ethan smiled before he even realized it. "Captain Blue," Lily called the moment she spotted him. Every adult nearby turned to look. Ethan sighed dramatically. "I was hoping that nickname might disappear." "Never." Lily grinned. "It is permanent now." The staff laughed. Charlotte covered her face in embarrassment. "I am so sorry." "You keep saying that," Ethan replied. "I am starting to think you are not actually sorry." Charlotte laughed. For a moment, the worry Ethan had noticed earlier seemed to disappear. She looked younger when she laughed. "Lighter." Lily immediately held up a drawing. "Look." Ethan crouched beside her. The picture showed a large sailing boat crossing bright blue water beneath a golden sunset. Standing on the deck was a stick figure wearing what appeared to be a blue captain's uniform. "That is me," Ethan asked. "Obviously. And why am I on a boat?" "Because captains belong on boats." Ethan could not argue with that logic. Then Lily pointed toward another figure standing beside the captain. A woman. And next to her, a little girl. Ethan's smile faded slightly. "Who are they?" Lily answered without hesitation. "A family." Something about the simplicity of her response caught him off guard. Children often reduced life's biggest questions into its simplest truths. A family. Nothing more complicated than that. Before Ethan could say anything else, Charlotte's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and immediately stepped away to answer. Ethan noticed the change in her expression. The worry returned instantly. He watched her walk several meters away and lower her voice. Although he could not hear every word, a few phrases carried clearly across the courtyard. "I understand." Pause. "I will make a payment next week." Another pause. "Please give me a little more time." Ethan looked away, pretending not to notice. Charlotte returned moments later wearing the same polite smile she always showed the world. But now Ethan knew something else. Behind every smile was a struggle she worked very hard to hide. And for reasons he could not fully explain, he found himself wanting to know the truth about all of it. The following morning arrived with clear skies and bright winter sunlight, reflecting off the harbor. The hotel lobby glowed beneath the early light, and guests moved through the revolving doors carrying coffee cups and weekend plans. Ethan arrived before most of the staff. For the first time since beginning his undercover assignment, his attention was divided. Part of him remained focused on the operational problems that had brought him here. The other part kept returning to Charlotte and Lily. As he crossed the service corridor, he noticed Charlotte speaking with the night manager near reception. She looked relieved for once. The tension that had followed her for days seemed lighter. Ethan almost smiled when he saw Lily sitting on a nearby chair, doing homework before school. The little girl looked up immediately. "Captain Blue." Ethan shook his head. "You know, most people say good morning. That is your good morning name." Lily grinned. "It is more efficient." Ethan laughed. "Fair enough." He walked over and noticed several sheets of paper spread across her lap. Mathematics exercises. Reading assignments. A drawing half hidden beneath them. "Busy morning?" he asked. Lily nodded dramatically. "Very busy. Being 7 is exhausting." Charlotte laughed softly from behind the desk. "Do not listen to her. She slept nearly 10 hours. That is because learning is hard work." Lily spoke with complete seriousness. Ethan found himself smiling again. He had attended meetings with government officials, investors, and international executives. Yet somehow conversations with Lily were becoming the most honest part of his day. Around mid-morning, a problem emerged. In one of the guest lifts, Ethan spent nearly an hour assisting the maintenance supervisor. By the time they finished, he was carrying a toolbox back through the main corridor when he heard Charlotte's voice nearby. She was helping a family check in. The young couple looked stressed. Their toddler was crying. Their luggage had not arrived from Melbourne. Their booking contained errors. Ethan watched Charlotte kneel slightly to speak directly to the child. Within moments, she had found coloring pencils, arranged a temporary room solution, and reassured the parents that everything would be handled. The transformation was immediate. The mother's shoulders relaxed. The father smiled for the first time. The child stopped crying. As the family headed toward the lifts, the father turned back. "Thank you. You made a difficult day much easier." Charlotte smiled. "Safe travels." The family disappeared. Charlotte immediately returned to work as though nothing special had happened. Yet Ethan noticed several staff members exchanging knowing looks. She did this every day. Quiet acts of kindness. Small moments nobody recorded. The sort of things that never appeared in performance reports. That afternoon, rain clouds rolled across the city. A steady drizzle tapped against the glass walls of the hotel. Guest traffic slowed. The atmosphere became calmer. Ethan was replacing batteries in emergency exit signs when Lily appeared beside him carrying a small cardboard box. "Treasure box inspection," she announced. "Excuse me. I need an expert opinion." Before Ethan could object, she sat on the floor and opened the box. Inside were dozens of small keepsakes. Seashells, ticket stubs, birthday cards, polished stones collected from beaches, a tiny toy lighthouse. Every item seemed connected to a memory. "Mom says I keep too much stuff," Lily explained. "But memories need somewhere to live." Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "That is actually very wise." Lily pointed proudly. "I know." They examined the contents together. Then Ethan noticed something familiar near the bottom. An old silver compass. His heartbeat slowed. The compass was worn and scratched from age. One side carried a tiny engraving. Ethan could not see it clearly from where he sat. "Where did you get that?" he asked carefully. Lily picked it up. "It belonged to my mom's cousin Amelia." Ethan froze. The name hit him like a sudden gust of cold air. Amelia. For several seconds, he forgot the corridor around him. Forgot the rain outside. Forgot the undercover assignment entirely. Amelia Grant. The woman he had loved. The woman who had vanished from his life 8 years earlier. Lily continued speaking, unaware of the storm suddenly unfolding inside him. "Mum says Amelia loved the ocean." She held up the compass. She carried this everywhere. Ethan stared at the object. Years ago, on a windswept coastal trip near Byron Bay, he had given Amelia a compass almost identical to that one. Not as an expensive gift, just a simple joke because she always got lost. He remembered her laughter. He remembered her promising she would keep it forever. "Captain Blue?" Lily asked softly. Ethan realized he had not responded. "Sorry." His voice sounded distant even to himself. What happened to Amelia? Lily shrugged. I do not know much. Mom says she was kind. Kind. The same word Lily used for almost everyone she loved. Before Ethan could ask another question, Charlotte appeared around the corner carrying paperwork. The moment she saw the compass in Lily's hands, her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. A flash of surprise, then concern, then something that looked very much like fear. Lily, Charlotte said gently, why do not we put the treasure box away for now? Lily obeyed immediately. Charlotte offered Ethan a polite smile, but it seemed forced. Sorry. She likes showing everyone her collection. It is fine, Ethan replied. Their eyes met briefly. For the first time since he had arrived at the hotel, Charlotte seemed genuinely uncomfortable. She quickly guided Lily away and disappeared toward the staff offices. Ethan remained where he was. Rain continued sliding down the windows. Guests moved quietly through the corridor. Somewhere in the distance, a piano melody drifted from the lounge bar. Yet Ethan barely heard any of it, because one name now echoed through his thoughts like a confession. Amelia. And for the first time in 8 years, the past no longer felt buried. It felt close. Close enough to touch, and impossible to ignore. That evening, Ethan remained in the hotel long after his shift had officially ended. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean beneath a sky streaked with silver and pale gold. The harbor reflected thousands of lights, but his attention remained fixed on a single memory. Amelia. The name had followed him through every successful year of his life, though he rarely allowed himself to admit it. He had spent years convincing himself that some questions would never be answered. Yet now those questions seemed closer than ever. The following morning began with unusual energy inside the hotel. A large corporate conference was arriving. Staff hurried between departments. Reception phones rang constantly. Guests filled the lobby from wall to wall. Ethan moved through the crowd carrying maintenance equipment while quietly observing everything around him. Despite the pressure, Charlotte remained calm. She welcomed guests, solved booking issues, answered questions, and somehow managed to keep smiling. Around 10 o'clock, one of the self-check-in kiosks stopped working. A queue immediately formed. Several guests became impatient. Before anyone else could react, Charlotte stepped away from reception and personally assisted every guest in line. Within minutes, the frustration disappeared. Ethan noticed something else. She never made anyone feel like a burden. No matter how busy she became, she treated each person as though they mattered. Later that morning, Lily arrived after a school activity. She entered the lobby carrying a backpack nearly half her size. The moment she spotted Ethan, her face brightened. Captain Blue. Several nearby guests turned to look. Ethan sighed dramatically. One day I will learn my real name again. Lily laughed and skipped toward him. I got an award today. She immediately pulled a certificate from her backpack. Ethan examined it. Excellence in creative writing. That is impressive. Lily stood a little taller. My teacher says I tell stories well. I believe it. Would you like to hear one? Ethan smiled. Always. They found a quiet corner near the indoor garden while Charlotte finished helping guests. Lily opened a notebook filled with handwritten stories and colorful drawings. Most featured boats, oceans, lighthouses, and adventures. Ethan noticed the pattern immediately. Every story contained a character who left on a journey and eventually found their way home. You really like happy endings, he said softly. Lily nodded. Everyone deserves one. The simplicity of the statement struck him harder than he expected. Before he could respond, Lily turned another page. This drawing was different. It showed a beach beneath a brilliant sunset. A woman stood holding the hand of a small child. Nearby stood a tall man facing the ocean. Ethan felt a strange chill. Who are they, he asked. I do not know. Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. I just keep dreaming about that place. Ethan stared at the drawing. The coastline looked familiar. Very familiar. A rocky headland. A curved stretch of sand. A small white lighthouse in the distance. He knew that beach. Years ago, he and Amelia had spent an entire weekend there. It had been one of the happiest memories of his life. Have you ever been there? He asked carefully. Lily shook her head. Not that I remember. Ethan looked at the drawing again. The resemblance was too precise to dismiss. Before he could ask another question, Charlotte approached carrying 3 takeaway hot chocolates. I thought you two might be plotting something important. Lily immediately accepted a cup. We are discussing literature. Charlotte laughed. Of course you are. She handed Ethan the third drink. Their fingers brushed briefly as he accepted it. Charlotte quickly pulled her hand back and smiled politely. Thank you for keeping her entertained. She is doing most of the entertaining. Lily seemed pleased by that answer. For a few minutes, the three of them sat together beside the indoor garden. Guests passed by. Soft piano music drifted from the lounge. For the first time since arriving undercover, Ethan forgot about business entirely. The moment felt strangely normal, comfortable, dangerous, because it reminded him of something he had not allowed himself to want for a very long time. Then Charlotte's phone buzzed. The change in her expression was immediate. Concern replaced the brief happiness she had been enjoying. She glanced at the screen and quickly silenced the call. Ethan noticed, but said nothing. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. Charlotte excused herself and stepped away. Lily watched her go. Mum worries too much. Ethan looked down at her. What makes you say that? She thinks I do not notice. Lily lowered her voice. But sometimes she stays awake after I go to bed. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his chest. Maybe she has a lot on her mind. Lily nodded. She misses Amelia. Ethan's attention sharpened instantly. She talks about Amelia? Sometimes. Lily traced a finger across the edge of her notebook. She says Amelia was brave and kind and loved the ocean. Ethan stared silently at the indoor fountain nearby. Every new detail seemed to pull the past closer. Charlotte returned moments later, though the worry remained visible in her eyes. She tried to hide it behind a smile. Ethan realized something important then. Whatever connection existed between Charlotte, Lily, and Amelia was not simply a coincidence. There was history here. Real history, hidden beneath years of silence. And as he watched Charlotte guide Lily toward the reception desk, Ethan made a decision. For the first time since beginning his undercover assignment, he would stop waiting for answers to appear on their own. Because somewhere inside this hotel, buried beneath ordinary conversations and forgotten memories, the truth was already revealing itself one small piece at a time. The decision stayed with Ethan throughout the rest of the week. He no longer viewed the strange connections surrounding Charlotte and Lily as isolated coincidences. There were too many of them. Amelia's name, the compass, the familiar coastline in Lily's drawings, the stories about the ocean. Each clue seemed small on its own, yet together they formed a pattern pointing toward a truth he feared. Early Saturday morning, the hotel was quieter than usual. Soft sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting golden reflections across the marble floor. Ethan was assigned to inspect a series of guest rooms on the upper levels. The work itself was routine, but his thoughts remained elsewhere. Around mid-morning, he stepped into a service lift and unexpectedly found Charlotte already inside carrying fresh linens. Busy day, he asked. Charlotte smiled politely. When is it ever not busy? Ethan chuckled. Fair point. For a moment, neither spoke. The lift continued upward. Soft instrumental music played through hidden speakers. Then Charlotte sighed almost imperceptibly. Sorry. For what? I am tired. She laughed softly. I think my filter stopped working. Ethan found himself smiling. You are allowed to be tired. Charlotte looked down at the folded linens in her arms. Sometimes I forget that. The honesty surprised him. It was the first time she had allowed any vulnerability to show. The lift doors opened on the 12th floor. Before stepping out, Charlotte paused. Thank you. Ethan frowned slightly. For what? Most people only notice when something goes wrong. Her smile carried a hint of sadness. You seem to notice when things go right too. Then she walked away. Ethan remained standing inside the lift for several seconds after the doors closed. Her words stayed with him. Most people only notice when something goes wrong. Later that afternoon, a sudden storm rolled across Sydney Harbor. Dark clouds gathered overhead. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the hotel. Guests hurried indoors while staff scrambled to manage weather-related delays. Amid the chaos, Ethan noticed Charlotte receiving another phone call. This time she stepped outside beneath a covered entrance near the staff parking area. Something about her expression made him pause. He was not trying to eavesdrop. In fact, he deliberately kept his distance. Yet the conversation carried through the rain. I understand. Silence. No, please do not cancel it. Another pause. I only need another 2 weeks. Ethan looked away immediately. The conversation clearly concerned money. When Charlotte returned inside, she carried the same professional smile she always wore, but her eyes looked exhausted. Deeply exhausted. That evening, Ethan finished work earlier than expected. As he crossed the lobby toward the staff exit, he noticed Lily sitting alone near the indoor garden with her sketchbook. "Where is your mom?" he asked. "Meeting." Lily continued drawing. "Important grown-up things." Ethan sat beside her. "And what are you working on?" Lily turned the sketchbook around. The page showed a small apartment. A kitchen, a dining table, a couch, several potted plants near a window. The drawing was surprisingly detailed. "Home?" Ethan asked. Lily nodded proudly. "Mom says it is not much." Her expression became serious. "But I think it is perfect." Ethan studied the picture. The furniture looked worn but cared for. The plants looked healthy. Every corner reflected warmth. "It looks nice. Mom likes making things beautiful." Lily selected another colored pencil. "Even when we cannot buy new things." Ethan felt a quiet ache in his chest. Children rarely cared about luxury. They cared about safety, about love, about feeling at home. "You and your mom are very close." Lily smiled. "She is my best friend." Then she lowered her voice slightly. "Sometimes I worry about her." Ethan glanced at the child. "Why?" Lily thought carefully before answering. "Because she worries about everything." Her small shoulders lifted in a shrug. "Bills, work, school, life." Ethan remained silent. "I wish someone would help her." The words landed harder than Lily could possibly know. Before Ethan could respond, Charlotte appeared from the far side of the lobby. She looked surprised to find them talking again. "There you are." Relief crossed her face as she approached. "Ready to go home?" Lily immediately gathered her things. As they prepared to leave, a folded paper slipped from the sketchbook and landed on the floor. Neither Charlotte nor Lily noticed. Ethan bent down and picked it up. "You dropped this." Charlotte turned. The moment she saw the paper, all color seemed to leave her face. She stepped forward quickly and accepted it. "Thank you." Her voice sounded different. Tighter. Ethan had only seen the image for a second. Yet that second was enough. It was an old photograph. A young blonde woman standing beside the ocean, smiling. Ethan knew that smile. Knew it instantly. Amelia. Charlotte tucked the photograph into her handbag almost immediately. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows. Guests moved through the lobby. Somewhere nearby, a coffee machine hissed. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Charlotte offered a polite smile and guided Lily toward the exit. Ethan watched them disappear into the rainy evening. His pulse refused to slow. Because for the first time, he was absolutely certain. Amelia was not simply part of their story. She was at the center of it. Sleep refused to come easily that night. Ethan stood beside the floor-to-ceiling window of his apartment, watching ferries move across the dark water below. The city glittered beneath the stars, yet his mind remained trapped in a single moment. Amelia's photograph. There had been no doubt. Not uncertainty. Not resemblance. It had been Amelia. The same bright smile. The same ocean breeze lifting her hair. The same woman he had spent years trying and failing to forget. By sunrise, Ethan had reached a conclusion. He needed answers. Real answers. Not assumptions built from coincidences. Not memories distorted by time. The hotel lobby was unusually calm that morning. Soft sunlight spilled through the glass entrance while guests enjoyed breakfast overlooking the harbor. Ethan arrived early and immediately noticed Charlotte already working. She looked composed as always, but now that he knew what to look for, the signs were impossible to miss. The tired eyes. The careful smile. The determination of someone carrying more than she allowed the world to see. Around mid-morning, Ethan found Lily sitting near the indoor garden with a stack of library books. Captain Blue. She smiled without looking up from her reading. "Good morning." Ethan sat beside her. "What are you reading?" Lily held up a book about Australian lighthouses. "Research. For school. For life." Ethan laughed softly. "That sounds important." "It is." She turned a page. "Did you know lighthouse keepers used to help lost people find their way home?" Ethan looked at her for a moment. "That seems fitting." Lily nodded seriously. "Everyone gets lost sometimes." The conversation lingered in Ethan's thoughts long after he returned to work. Everyone gets lost sometimes. By early afternoon, a maintenance issue required him to inspect a storage room near the administration offices. As he finished replacing a damaged lock, he heard voices approaching from the corridor. Instinctively, he stepped back while continuing his work. The voices belonged to Charlotte and one of the senior managers. I appreciate everything you do, the manager said. But the promotion is not my decision. Ethan froze. Promotion? Charlotte remained quiet for several seconds. I understand. You deserve it. Then why does it keep going to someone else? The question was gentle. Not angry. Not bitter. Simply honest. The manager sighed. You take time off for Lily when she needs you. You cannot stay late every night. The executives want someone fully available. Ethan felt a flash of irritation. Charlotte gave a small laugh that contained no humor at all. Being a mother counts against me. I did not say that. You did not need to. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Charlotte walked away carrying a folder against her chest. Ethan remained where he was, staring at the floor. For the first time, he understood why so many staff respected her. She was carrying responsibilities that would overwhelm most people. Yet she continued showing kindness to everyone around her. That evening, the hotel hosted a private charity function. Guests in formal attire filled the ballroom. Soft music drifted through the corridors. Ethan spent most of the event managing technical issues behind the scenes. Shortly after 8 o'clock, he stepped into a quiet hallway and found Lily sitting alone on a bench. Her feet swung gently above the floor. Not enjoying the party? He asked. Lily wrinkled her nose. Too many adults talking about boring things. Ethan sat beside her. That is a fair assessment. Lily smiled. Then she reached into her backpack. I want to show you something. Ethan immediately felt curious. She pulled out a small notebook. Not the sketchbook he had seen before. This one looked older. The cover was worn. Several pages were bent from years of use. What is it? He asked. Lily carefully opened it. Mom keeps this safe, but she lets me read it sometimes. Ethan looked down. The first page contained handwritten notes. Beautiful handwriting. Familiar handwriting. His heartbeat quickened. He recognized it instantly. Amelia's. The world seemed to narrow around him. Who wrote this? He asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Lily smiled. Amelia. Ethan stared at the page. The handwriting was exactly as he remembered. Elegant. Flowing. Unmistakable. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. What does it say? Lily glanced down and read aloud. If you ever feel lost, follow the ocean. It always knows the way home. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Years ago, Amelia had said those exact words while they stood together on a windy beach watching waves roll toward shore. A memory he had never shared with anyone. A memory nobody else should have known. Slowly, he opened his eyes again. Lily. His voice sounded different. Softer. How did this notebook come to you? Before Lily could answer, Charlotte's voice echoed down the corridor. Lily. Both turned immediately. Charlotte approached quickly. The moment she saw the notebook, she stopped. Her expression changed. Not surprised this time. Something deeper. Something closer to resignation. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The sounds of the distant ballroom faded into the background. Charlotte looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Charlotte. And for the first time, neither pretended the past was not standing between them. Charlotte's eyes remained fixed on the notebook for several long seconds. The soft music drifting from the ballroom seemed impossibly distant. Around them, guests laughed, glasses clinked, and waiters moved through the hotel carrying trays of food, but none of it seemed to matter. Lily looked from one adult to the other, sensing a tension she could not fully understand. Did I do something wrong? She asked quietly. Charlotte immediately knelt beside her daughter. No, sweetheart. Not at all. Her voice was gentle, but Ethan noticed the strain beneath it. Lily relaxed slightly. Then why does everyone look so serious? Neither adult answered immediately. Charlotte carefully took the notebook from Lily's hands and held it against her chest. For a moment, Ethan thought she might walk away again. Instead, she surprised him. Lily, why do not you help Mrs. Turner in the gift shop for a little while? Lily glanced between them. You are going to have a grown-up conversation, aren't you? Charlotte managed a small smile. Probably. Those are usually boring. Ethan almost laughed despite the situation. Lily sighed dramatically, then stood and adjusted her backpack. Fine. But if anyone cries, I want details later. Charlotte shook her head in disbelief as Lily disappeared down the corridor. Once she was gone, silence settled between them. Ethan looked at the notebook. Charlotte followed his gaze. You recognized the handwriting. It was not a question. Ethan nodded. Immediately. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. I thought you might. The honesty caught him off guard. For days, both of them had been carefully avoiding the obvious. Now the walls were beginning to crack. Who was Amelia to you? Ethan asked softly. Charlotte looked down at the notebook in her hands. She was my cousin. The answer landed with surprising force. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Your cousin? Charlotte nodded. More like a sister, honestly. We grew up together. For several moments, neither spoke. Ethan stared at the notebook. The worn cover. The familiar handwriting. The memories attached to every page. I spent years looking for her, he said quietly. Charlotte's expression shifted. Not surprise. Sadness. Deep sadness. I know. Ethan blinked. You know? Charlotte gave a small nod. Amelia told me about you. The words seemed to stop time entirely. Ethan stared at her. She talked about me? All the time. Charlotte's smile was bittersweet, especially during the months before everything changed. Ethan felt as though the floor had shifted beneath him. For years he had carried unanswered questions. Had Amelia stopped loving him? Had she chosen to leave? Had he? Imagine what they had together? Now, suddenly, someone standing in front of him possessed pieces of a story he had spent nearly a decade trying to understand. Charlotte. He paused. What happened to her? Charlotte lowered her gaze. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt much longer. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. Amelia passed away 7 years ago. Ethan stopped breathing. The corridor around him blurred slightly. 7 years. The words echoed through his mind without fully registering. Passed away. Gone. Final. Permanent. He had imagined countless possibilities over the years. None of them had prepared him for this. Charlotte looked away toward the ballroom lights. I am sorry. Ethan stared at the floor. 1,000 memories crashed through him at once. Amelia laughing on a windy beach. Amelia teasing him for getting lost during a coastal drive. Amelia standing barefoot near the ocean at sunset. Memories he had protected because they were all he had left. And now he was learning there would never be new ones. Never answers from her directly. Never another conversation. Never another chance. Why did nobody tell me? He asked quietly. Charlotte hesitated. I do not know everything. But you know something. She nodded. More than I used to. Ethan waited. Charlotte looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a truth for too long. Amelia disappeared from a lot of people's lives very quickly, she said. There were family complications. Mistakes. Decisions made by people who thought they were helping. Ethan frowned. Helping who? Charlotte did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked down the corridor where Lily had disappeared. The gesture was subtle, but Ethan noticed it. And in that moment, another piece of the puzzle shifted into place. Charlotte. His voice was barely above a whisper. What does Lily have to do with all of this? Charlotte froze. For the first time since they met, genuine fear crossed her face. Not fear for herself. Fear for someone else. Ethan suddenly remembered every clue. Lily's age. Amelia's notebook. The compass. The photograph. The familiar beach. The stories. The eyes. The impossible feeling he had experienced every time he looked at the little girl. Charlotte looked as though she wanted to speak. Wanted to explain everything. Yet something held her back. I cannot have this conversation here, she said quietly. Ethan studied her face. Every instinct told him she was standing on the edge of a truth that would change everything. Then where? Charlotte took a slow breath. Tomorrow. Ethan waited. There is a cafe near Watson's Bay. 9 o'clock. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. If you really want answers, I will tell you everything I know. Before Ethan could respond, Charlotte turned and walked away. He remained standing alone in the corridor long after she disappeared from sight. The sounds of the hotel slowly returned. Music, conversations, laughter, ordinary life continuing around him. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Because tomorrow, for the first time in 8 years, he would finally come face to face with the truth. The next morning arrived beneath a sky of pale blue and drifting white clouds. Watson's Bay was quiet at that hour. Gentle waves rolled against the shoreline. Seagulls circled above the water. The scent of salt and fresh coffee lingered in the cool air. Ethan arrived early. He chose a table overlooking the harbor and watched ferries cross the water in the distance. Every passing minute felt longer than it should. For years he had lived with uncertainty. Now answers seemed close enough to touch. At exactly 9 o'clock, Charlotte appeared. She wore a simple cream jumper, dark jeans, and no hotel uniform. Without the professional mask she wore at work, she looked different. Younger in some ways. More tired in others. She carried a small canvas bag and a seriousness that immediately told Ethan this conversation would change everything. Charlotte sat across from him. For several moments, neither spoke. A waitress arrived, took their coffee order, and left again. Finally, Charlotte looked toward the ocean. Amelia loved this place. Ethan followed her gaze. We came here together once. Charlotte smiled sadly. I know. Ethan remained silent. Charlotte took a slow breath. After you. And Amelia lost contact. Everything happened very quickly. The words immediately captured his full attention. What happened? Charlotte looked down at her hands. She discovered she was pregnant. Ethan felt the world narrow around him. The sounds of the cafe seemed to fade into the background. The ocean, the conversations, the clinking cups. Everything became distant. Pregnant, he repeated quietly. Charlotte nodded. With your child? Ethan stared at her. For several seconds he could not speak. A lifetime of business negotiations had taught him how to remain composed under pressure. None of that mattered now. Why did she not tell me? Charlotte's eyes filled with sadness. She tried. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Charlotte reached into her canvas bag and removed a small envelope. The paper looked worn with age. She placed it carefully on the table between them. She wrote letters. Ethan stared at the envelope. His name was written across the front in Amelia's unmistakable handwriting. His chest tightened. I never received this. I know. Charlotte looked away briefly. Neither did she. Ethan felt confusion growing inside him. Who stopped them? Charlotte hesitated. Amelia's father. The answer landed heavily. Ethan remembered the man well. Wealthy, influential, protective to the point of control. He had never approved of their relationship. At the time, Ethan had been ambitious but far from successful. Just a young entrepreneur struggling to build a future. He told her I had left? Ethan asked. Charlotte nodded. And he told you nothing at all. Ethan stared at the envelope. Years of unanswered questions suddenly began rearranging themselves into a different story. A story neither he nor Amelia had chosen. Charlotte continued quietly. Amelia believed you had moved on. I never did. I know. Tears glistened briefly in Charlotte's eyes. She never really did either. The waitress returned with coffee. Neither touched it. The steam slowly drifted into the morning air. Charlotte looked toward the water again. When Lily was born, Amelia was happy despite everything. She adored her. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Lily, the little girl who loved lighthouses. The little girl who called him Captain Blue. The little girl who somehow felt familiar from the moment they met. His daughter. The possibility had already begun forming inside him days earlier, but hearing the truth aloud changed everything. Charlotte continued, speaking carefully. For 2 years, Amelia raised Lily herself. Ethan listened without interrupting. Then she became ill. Fear immediately entered his voice. Ill? Charlotte nodded slowly. A serious medical condition. She swallowed. She fought it for a long time. Ethan looked out toward the ocean. The sunlight reflecting off the water blurred slightly. And Lily? Charlotte smiled sadly. Amelia worried about her every day. A long silence followed. The last time I saw Amelia in hospital, Charlotte said softly. She asked me for one promise. Ethan already knew what she was going to say. Take care of Lily. Charlotte nodded. She wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by love. Ethan stared down at the untouched coffee. So you became her guardian. The day after Amelia passed away, another silence settled between them. This one felt heavier than the others. Charlotte finally reached into her bag once more and removed a photograph. Ethan recognized it immediately. Amelia sitting on a beach holding a toddler in her lap. Lily, even at 2 years old, the resemblance was unmistakable. The eyes, the smile, the expression. Ethan felt something break open inside his heart. Years lost. Birthdays missed. First words. First steps. School awards. Bedtime stories. Entire chapters of his daughter's life had passed without him ever knowing she existed. Charlotte watched him quietly. I wanted to tell you many times. Ethan looked up. Why did you not? Charlotte's expression filled with pain. Because I was afraid. Of me. Of losing her. Her voice trembled slightly. Lily became my daughter in every way that mattered. Not by blood. By love. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he understood. The fear. The exhaustion. The sacrifices. The years spent protecting a child she never expected to raise. Charlotte had never been hiding Lily from him out of selfishness. She had been protecting the family she built from grief and the terrifying possibility that another adult might leave Lily again. Across the table, neither spoke. The ocean continued rolling toward shore. The morning sun climbed higher into the sky. And for the first time in 8 years, Ethan finally knew the truth. Lily was his daughter. Amelia had never stopped loving him. And Charlotte Hayes had been carrying the weight of all their broken lives alone. The drive back from Watson's Bay felt longer than it actually was. Sydney moved around Ethan in its usual rhythm. Ferries crossed the harbor. Traffic flowed through sunlit streets. People hurried through ordinary Saturday mornings. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. He had spent years building an empire, years solving problems with numbers, contracts, and strategy. But none of those skills prepared him for the simple truth now sitting inside his chest. He had a daughter who loved lighthouses, drew sailboats, and believed everyone deserved a happy ending. A daughter who had spent 7 years growing up without ever knowing who he was. By the time Ethan returned to the hotel, the weight of that reality felt almost impossible to carry. The lobby was busy with weekend travelers. Families checked in. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. Somewhere near reception, a child laughed. The sound immediately made him think of Lily. He spotted Charlotte behind the front desk. Their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Both knew that everything had changed. Charlotte looked away first and returned to helping a guest. Ethan quietly continued toward the maintenance corridor. For the remainder of the afternoon, he worked almost mechanically, replacing fittings, inspecting equipment, completing tasks he barely remembered afterward. His thoughts remained elsewhere. They remained with Amelia. They remained with Lily. Most of all, they remained with the years that could never be recovered. Late that evening, after the final guests from a conference had returned to their rooms, Ethan sat alone in an unused meeting room. In front of him rested the envelope Charlotte had given him, the letter Amelia had written years earlier. He carefully unfolded the pages. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The handwriting remained as beautiful as he remembered. Ethan read every word slowly. Amelia had written about hope, about fear, about becoming a mother. She had written about the future she wanted for their child. She had written about him, not with anger, not with resentment, with love. The final lines shattered what little composure he still possessed. If our child ever meets you one day, I hope she inherits your kindness. Ethan lowered the letter and closed his eyes. Kindness, not success, not wealth, not status. Kindness. Even now, years later, Amelia understood what truly mattered. The following morning, Ethan arrived at the hotel earlier than usual. A decision had formed during the night. He needed certainty, not because he doubted Charlotte, not because he doubted Amelia, but because Lily deserved the truth to be built upon facts rather than assumptions. Shortly after arriving, he quietly contacted a trusted legal advisor. By midday, arrangements had been made. Records would be reviewed properly, documents verified, every question answered with certainty and respect. No secrets, no shortcuts. Ethan intended to proceed carefully. Lily's well-being mattered more than anything else. That afternoon, he found Lily sitting in her usual place near the indoor garden. She was drawing another sailboat. Without looking up, she smiled. Hello, Captain Blue. Ethan sat beside her. Hello, Lily. You sound serious today. Ethan laughed softly. Do I? Definitely. She studied him for a moment. Did something happen? Children possessed a remarkable ability to notice things adults often missed. Ethan considered the question carefully. I learned something important. Lily nodded as though that made perfect sense. Good important or bad important? I think good important. She seemed satisfied by the answer. For a few minutes they sat quietly together. Then Lily pointed toward her drawing. Do you know what my favorite thing about boats is? Ethan shook his head. What? They can always find a new direction. Ethan looked at her. Once again, a child had somehow managed to express something profound using the simplest words imaginable. A new direction. Nearby, Charlotte was helping guests at reception. Every so often, she glanced toward Lily. Not because she was worried, because she loved her. The realization struck Ethan with unexpected force. Charlotte had spent 7 years being there for every difficult moment, every school performance, every illness, every fear, every celebration. While he had been completely unaware of Lily's existence, Charlotte had devoted her entire life to protecting her. Gratitude began replacing some of the anger he had carried since learning the truth. Not all of it. He was still furious at the choices made years ago. Furious at the deception that had stolen time from everyone involved. But none of that anger belonged to Charlotte. As evening approached, the hotel hosted another event. Guests filled the ballroom. Staff moved efficiently through the corridors. Ethan observed everything with new eyes. For years he had measured success through expansion plans, market share, and financial reports. Now another question lingered in his mind. What kind of father would Lily see if she learned the truth tomorrow? The thought stayed with him until long after sunset. Because for the first time in many years, Ethan was not thinking about the next business acquisition or development project. He was thinking about a 7-year-old girl who believed lighthouse keepers helped lost people find their way home. And he realized something remarkable. Without either of them knowing it, Lily had already begun helping him find his way home too. 3 days later, the final documents arrived. Ethan sat alone in the private office that had secretly served as his base throughout the Undercover assignment. Morning sunlight stretched across the desk. The city beyond the windows looked calm. Ordinary. Yet nothing about this moment felt ordinary. A single folder rested in front of him. Inside were the verified records. Birth certificates. Hospital documentation. Legal guardianship papers. Every question he had carried now had an answer. Lily Hayes was his daughter. Not a possibility. Not a theory. A fact. Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, relief and grief arrived together. Relief that the uncertainty was over. Grief for the years already lost. 7 years. 7 birthdays. 7 Christmas mornings. 7 years of scraped knees, school projects, bedtime stories, and dreams he had never been there to witness. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His trusted advisor entered quietly. Everything is confirmed. Ethan nodded. I know. What will you do now? Ethan looked down at the photograph sitting beside the folder. Lily smiling proudly beside one of her drawings. Charlotte standing behind her. Both unaware that his entire world had shifted because of them. I will do the only thing that matters. The advisor waited. I will put Lily first. The man smiled slightly. That sounds like Amelia would have approved. After he left, Ethan remained alone for a long time. The temptation to act immediately was strong. Years of business success had trained him to solve problems quickly, to move decisively, to take control. But this was not a business problem. This was a child, a family, a life Charlotte had built carefully over 7 years. One reckless decision could damage everything. That afternoon, Ethan requested a private meeting with Charlotte after her shift ended. The message was simple. No pressure, no urgency, just a conversation. Charlotte arrived shortly after 6 o'clock. The hotel had grown quiet. Most guests were enjoying dinner. The lobby glowed beneath warm evening lights. Ethan met her in a small conference room overlooking the harbor. The moment she entered, he could see the tension in her face. She already knew. The results came back, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Neither pretended otherwise. Charlotte sat across from him and folded her hands tightly together. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan spoke. Thank you. Charlotte blinked. Thank you. For raising her. The word surprised her. Ethan could see it immediately. She had expected anger. Accusations. Demands. Not gratitude. Charlotte, I cannot imagine how difficult those years were. His voice remained calm. You gave her a home. Stability. Love. Charlotte looked down. She gave me. Those things too. Ethan felt emotion tightening his chest. I believe that. Tears appeared in Charlotte's eyes. She quickly looked away toward the harbor. I was terrified you would hate me. Ethan shook his head slowly. There are people I am angry with. He paused. You are not one of them. Charlotte released a shaky breath. For the first time since this truth had emerged, some of the fear seemed to leave her shoulders. Then her expression changed. New fear. Deeper fear. What happens now? Ethan understood the question beneath the question. What happens to Lily? What happens to us? What happens to the family we built? Charlotte's voice grew quieter. She is everything to me. Ethan leaned forward slightly. I know. I never wanted to keep her from you. I know. Her voice broke briefly. I could not lose her too. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. Then he asked the question that had been living inside him for days. Who sat beside her bed when she was sick? Charlotte looked confused. What? Who comforted her after nightmares? Ethan continued softly. Who attended school meetings? Who packed lunches? Who celebrated every achievement? Charlotte stared at him. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Ethan's own eyes felt suspiciously warm. You did. Charlotte lowered her head. Yes. Then nobody is taking that away from you. The room became completely silent. Outside, lights reflected across the dark water of the harbor. Charlotte slowly looked up. You mean that? Ethan nodded. Lily does not need fewer people who love her. His voice remained steady. She needs more. The tears came more freely now. Not because of sadness. Because of relief. Months of fear. Years of worry. All beginning to loosen their grip. Charlotte covered her face briefly before managing a small laugh through the tears. You know, for a maintenance worker, you give surprisingly good speeches. Ethan smiled. There is something else you should know. Charlotte frowned slightly. Ethan reached into his pocket and placed a business card on the table. She glanced down. Her eyes widened immediately. The room seemed to freeze. She looked from the card back to Ethan. Then back again. You are Ethan Calloway. Yes. Charlotte stared at him in complete disbelief. The owner of this hotel. Among other things. Captain Blue is a billionaire. Ethan laughed for the first time that evening. A genuine laugh. Charlotte shook her head slowly. Lily is never going to let me hear the end of this. For a brief moment, both of them smiled. And in that small moment, something important happened. Not a solution. Not an ending. Simply the first fragile step toward becoming a family shaped not by secrets, but by truth, patience. The following week unfolded differently for everyone involved, though Lily remained blissfully unaware of the enormous changes taking place around her. She continued arriving at the hotel after school with her backpack, sketchbooks, and endless collection of questions about boats, oceans, and lighthouse keepers. Yet for Ethan, every ordinary moment now carried extraordinary meaning. Every smile from Lily, every laugh, every story she shared, every ordinary question. These were no longer simply charming interactions with a remarkable child. They were moments with his daughter. On Tuesday afternoon, Lily burst into the lobby carrying a certificate above her head. Captain Blue, she announced before she even reached him. Several guests turned to look. Ethan immediately smiled. That usually means something important. It is very important. She handed him the certificate. First place. School creative writing competition. Ethan read the words twice. Then a third time. Pride swelled inside him so suddenly it almost caught him off guard. This is incredible. Lily beamed. My teacher says I have imagination. Your teacher is absolutely right. Across the lobby, Charlotte watched the exchange from reception. Her eyes softened. For years she had imagined what this moment might look like if circumstances had been different. She had imagined Amelia witnessing these milestones. She had imagined Lily knowing her father. Yet reality was somehow stranger and more beautiful than anything she had expected. Later that evening, Ethan quietly invited Charlotte and Lily to dinner. Not an extravagant dinner. Not a luxury restaurant. Just a small waterfront cafe overlooking the harbor. Charlotte hesitated initially. Everything still felt new, fragile, uncertain. But Lily's enthusiasm eliminated any possibility of refusal. A celebration dinner, she declared. Award winners deserve celebration dinners. The cafe overlooked the water where ferries drifted through the evening light. Seagulls circled above the shoreline. The scent of grilled seafood and fresh bread filled the air. For the first time, they sat together outside the hotel environment that had defined their relationship. Without uniforms, without disguises, without secrets. Lily talked almost continuously. About school, about books, about her dream of visiting every lighthouse in Australia one day. Ethan listened carefully to every word. Not because the stories were extraordinary, but because they belonged to her. Halfway through the meal, Lily suddenly narrowed her eyes suspiciously. I have a question. Charlotte immediately recognized the tone. That usually means trouble. Lily ignored her. How rich are you? Ethan nearly choked on his drink. Charlotte closed her eyes. Lily. What? Lily looked genuinely confused. Everyone keeps acting weird since they found out who Captain Blue is. Ethan laughed despite himself. I suppose the answer is that I have been fortunate. That is grown-up code for very rich. Ethan could not argue with that logic. Lily considered this carefully. Does being rich make life easier? The question surprised both adults. Ethan thought for several moments before answering. Some things become easier. Lily nodded thoughtfully. But not everything. Ethan smiled. No, not everything. She seemed satisfied by the answer. Then she returned to eating chips as though she had not just asked one of the deepest questions of the evening. After dinner, they walked slowly along the waterfront. The harbor glowed beneath thousands of city lights. A cool breeze drifted across the water. At one point, Lily ran ahead to watch a ferry docking nearby. Charlotte and Ethan found themselves walking side by side. "Thank you," Charlotte said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. "For what?" "For being patient." He understood immediately. Patient with Lily. Patient with her. Patient with a complicated situation that would have tested anyone. She deserves patience. Charlotte smiled faintly. Most people would have rushed things. Ethan watched Lily laughing near the ferry terminal. Most people did not miss 7 years. The sadness in his voice was impossible to hide. Charlotte stopped walking. "Ethan." He looked at her. "Amelia loved you." The words landed softly. Not like a revelation. More like a truth finally being spoken aloud. Charlotte continued. "She never stopped." Ethan stared toward the water. For years he had wondered. For years he had questioned every memory, every decision, every possibility. Hearing those words brought an unexpected peace. Not complete peace. Some losses could never be fully healed. But enough. Enough to let him breathe. A few meters away, Lily suddenly waved both arms. "Come look at this." They joined her near the railing. A ferry was slowly departing into the darkness. Its lights reflected across the water like scattered stars. Lily watched it disappear toward the horizon. "Do you know what I think?" she asked. "What?" Ethan said. Lily smiled. "I think sometimes people spend a long time looking for something." She pointed toward the ferry. Then one day they realized it was heading toward them the whole time. Neither adult spoke. The harbor breeze carried away the silence. Charlotte looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Lily. And for a brief moment, it felt as though Amelia's memory stood beside them too. Not in sadness, not in regret, but in the quiet certainty that love had somehow found its way back home. Spring arrived quietly over Sydney. The harbor sparkled beneath clear blue skies. Jacaranda trees began coloring the streets with soft shades of violet. Life moved forward the way it always does, one ordinary day at a time. Yet for Ethan, Charlotte, and Lily, those ordinary days had become something precious. Several months had passed since the truth emerged. There had been difficult conversations, emotional moments, countless adjustments, but there had also been laughter, shared meals, school events, weekend walks along the coastline, the slow and careful building of trust. Ethan had learned something unexpected during those months. Becoming a father was not a single moment. It was 1,000 small moments. It was helping Lily with a school project about Australian marine wildlife. It was listening to her explain why lighthouse architecture was fascinating. It was receiving voice messages that somehow contained 5 different stories and 3 unrelated questions. It was being included in the ordinary details of her life. One bright Saturday morning, Ethan stood near the shoreline at Watson's Bay, watching Lily race ahead along the walking path. Her laughter carried through the ocean breeze. Charlotte walked beside him holding 2 takeaway coffees. "She has a lot of energy today." Ethan smiled. "Only today?" Charlotte laughed softly. The sound still affected him in ways he could not fully explain. Not because it was dramatic, because it felt like home. Ahead of them, Lily stopped beside a lookout point overlooking the water. She waved enthusiastically. "Come on. You are missing the view." Ethan and Charlotte joined her. The ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Sunlight danced across the waves. Several sailboats drifted peacefully through the harbor entrance. For a few moments, none of them spoke. Then Lily reached into her backpack. "I brought something." Ethan immediately recognized the tone. Whenever Lily said those words, something important usually followed. She carefully removed a framed photograph. Charlotte's eyes widened slightly. Ethan stared at the image. It showed Amelia, young, smiling, standing beside the ocean she loved so much. Lily placed the photograph on the lookout bench facing the water. "I wanted her to see this view too." Silence settled around them. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind created by love and memory. Charlotte brushed a tear from her cheek. Ethan stared at Amelia's smile. The ache of losing her would never completely disappear. But it no longer felt empty, because part of her remained right here beside them. In Lily's smile, in her kindness, in her imagination, in the way she believed everyone deserved a happy ending. Lily looked up at the photograph. "I wish I could remember more." Charlotte wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders. You remember what matters. Ethan nodded. And there are people who can help tell the rest of her story. Lily smiled softly. Like you. Ethan felt emotion rise unexpectedly. Yes. And Mom. Charlotte nodded. Always. Lily seemed satisfied by that answer. After a while, they continued walking along the shoreline. Later that afternoon, they stopped at a small cafe overlooking the water. It had become something of a tradition. Lily ordered the same thing every time. Hot chips and a chocolate milkshake. Ethan suspected she loved traditions simply because they made life feel secure. Halfway through lunch, Lily placed her milkshake down and looked unusually serious. Ethan immediately recognized that expression. It meant a significant question was coming. Can I ask something? Charlotte smiled knowingly. You were going to ask anyway. Lily ignored her. Her attention remained fixed on Ethan. Do you regret not knowing about me? The question caught him completely off guard. The cafe suddenly seemed very quiet. Ethan looked at his daughter carefully. She was not asking out of insecurity. She genuinely wanted to understand. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. I regret missing those years. His voice was calm, honest, more than I can explain. Lily lowered her eyes briefly. Ethan continued, but I will never regret knowing you. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Lily smiled. It was not a dramatic smile, just a small one. The kind that begins in the heart before reaching the face. Charlotte looked away toward the harbor, blinking rapidly. Ethan suspected she was trying not to cry. Lily solved the problem by immediately changing the subject. Good. She took another sip of milkshake. Because I already told everyone at school you were stuck with me. Ethan laughed. Charlotte laughed. Even Lily laughed. The tension disappeared instantly. The afternoon sunlight poured through the cafe windows. Ferries moved across the harbor. Conversations drifted through the room. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet Ethan knew he would remember this day. Forever. As the sun began setting later that evening, the three of them stood once more beside the water. The sky glowed orange and gold. Sailboats became silhouettes against the horizon. Lily slipped her hand into Charlotte's with one hand and Ethan's with the other. It happened naturally, without hesitation, without ceremony. They stood there watching the sunset together. A family not created by perfection, not created by timing, not even created by blood alone. A family created by love, by sacrifice, by forgiveness, by people choosing each other again and again despite everything life had placed in their path. Somewhere beyond the harbor, the final rays of sunlight disappeared beneath the horizon. Lily smiled at the fading light and squeezed both their hands. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then at Charlotte, then out toward the endless ocean Amelia had loved so much. And for the first time in many years, his heart felt completely at peace. Because sometimes the people we spend years searching for are already sailing toward us. Sometimes love survives silence, grief, and distance. And when kindness guides the way, even the longest journey can finally lead home.